Yes, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us today for our webinar session number 8. It's the last session of the year. We are very pleased today to welcome Tony Michell, Managing Director of KABC, Korean Associate Business Consultancy, and he's also a professor at the KDI, Korean Development Institute. Good afternoon, Tony, and thank you very much for accepting again our invitation.
Thank you for inviting me.
So I'm sure everyone knows Tony. He has been joining us for many years now. He's the most reputable specialist about the Korean political and business landscape. For over 30 years, Tony has been supporting countless projects for the Korean government and private sectors. He is as well a notable reference for international news media like the BBC, ABC, CNN, CNBC, Bloomberg, just to name a few. Also with us, who will be joining us a little bit later, Erwan Villefeu, SKBC chairman, and Tulik Pharma president, who will be joining the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So thank you to post all your questions in the chat box. During the presentation, you can ask questions, and it will be answered at the end of this presentation. So today's presentation will help us to understand more in detail the current and future shape of the Korean economic outlook, from current pandemic and newly developed vaccines making their way in the market, how those 21 economic shapes will look like. So thank you very much. I will hand it over now to Tony. Maybe you can say a few words and start your presentation.
Okay, thank you. Let me make a funny face while I try to share my screen like everybody else. I mean to make a video of people trying to share screens.
Right.
Put it on TikTok or something.
It will be recorded, so we will keep this funny face with us.
Okay, thank you. I can look at it and check whether I'm getting better or worse. Okay, so the title I was given was What to Expect in 2021, and I will try to answer that. So I want to start by briefly outlining 5 issues which will shape business in Korea. Whether it shapes your business in Korea, I'm not so sure, but it will shape various aspects of Korean business. So the one that you all expect is the speed with which COVID-19 comes under control in Korea and its major trading partners. When we get back to new normal, what does it look like? Second one for me is the accelerating rise of Asia's economy versus Europe or the US in late 2020 and through 2021, and how that affects the balance of forces between China and the US as they act on Korea. Third one is the crisis of moonism in Korea and degree of new thinking in the administration. This morning's Korea Times has a headline, Spectre of Lame Duck Looming Over President. I didn't know that when I wrote this theme. And the fourth, the rise of response to green economy. And finally, if we have time, the crisis in government finance versus the New Deal and the Green Deal and the extension of the social security network, and how quickly can Korea get to the day after tomorrow rather than tomorrow, and what does it look like? So let me get straight on with where we are today, which is that Korea is on a roll in terms of stock market, in terms of strengthening of the won, but COVID is spiking, and the PM hesitated too long, and now the president is getting flack for waiting too long to increase to level 2.5. Excuse me. So the won is at a 23-month high against the dollar. Costs be pretty well at the height that it's ever been at 2,740. I didn't look this morning. Year on year for Q3 was higher than forecast at only minus 1.3%. And this means that Korea could have been on track to hit BOK's August GDP mild forecast. We got a later forecast coming of 0.9% for 2020, although BAK prefers minus 1.1, and Koreans are raising the 2021 forecast to 3%. I'll deal with these numbers in more detail in a minute. For many companies, Q3 financial results better than expected. Consumer confidence, according to the last November figures, are still in recovery. And this recovery, the low loss of growth in 2020, puts more emphasis on Korea as an attractive market. You would think for Q4, but Q4 is almost over, and for 2021. And the recovery has been almost entirely driven by exports and some investment. Consumer expenditure is still down. But with the rise in COVID-19 cases from about 200 not so long ago to over 500 per day, further increase in social distancing was required under the new 5-point scale. There'll be an exam on what the 5-point scale means later on, because I don't think anybody fully understands it. And as in September, the PM was reluctant to increase severity. So individual cities did it by themselves, 1 to 1.5, nationally to 1.5, November 19, moved to 2 for Greater Seoul at the end of November, and then 2.5 on December 5th. Actually, nobody knows what the final point on the scale of 3 would look like, because government makes it up as it goes along. Vaccine availability date is unclear for most Koreans, but we're told to expect a rapid rollout for 20 to 40 million Koreans, somewhere end of Q2 or in Q3 2021. Biden's election will stabilize world agreements, but it's not clear whether that will be good or bad for North Korean rapprochement or for US-China policy. We have Foreign Minister Hwang visit Korea after Japan at the end of November. There's an earnest effort to get reconciled with Japan so we could still have that Korea, Japan, China conference or summit. Actually in December, it was after Christmas last year, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen this time. However, Hwang was saying, now we got RCEP out of the way, will you please finish the Japan, Korea, China FTA? And the RCEP FTA agreement was finally agreed, minus India, November 15th. And I want to spend some time explaining why it massively increases the attractiveness of Asia for 21 and 22 for investors. So first of all, we need to deal with COVID. And here on my screen, my photo blocking part of the, there we are. On my screen, it's moved out of the way. We can see that this diagram shows the second wave and the third wave, and the third wave is so obviously worse than the second wave. And neither the president nor the prime minister seem to have taken that into account. Every 2 weeks when I update the number of infections and the number of deaths, I'm surprised at the jump. ICU beds are up. The KCDC has changed its words from ICU patients to critical patients. So they're including people who are not yet in ICU beds because they don't have them, but likely to go in as soon as somebody dies. So right at the edge of the ability to handle the epidemic, worse than the second peak. And now there are concerns that if we get the third peak under control, still when everything's relaxed, we'll go into a fourth peak, maybe around the Chinese New Year, because no one will have vaccine at that time in February. So QR codes are increasingly used. I was emphasizing we need to use them like China, but even when used, they're not properly collected and coordinated. So we have a serious cluster which is socially driven and in care homes. And as I said before, the vaccine rollout remains unclear. Maybe we can talk about that with Erwin when we get to Q&A. So when will COVID be under control? Nobody knows. We can't predict when the current wave will be under control. Have we done enough? Did we do it early enough? Because this social spread of COVID-19 is based on a wide distribution of the disease. Koreans relax their social controls whenever they meet socially, and the spread is inevitable unless controls inside the home are also observed. And still under 2.5, you can have 50 people in an indoor meeting, which seems to me a recipe for future infections. We've got a whole bundle of little clusters of about 50 people. Government has given mixed signals about the potential availability of vaccine, putting its faith in the less expensive Oxford AstraZeneca, but that's not finally approved, and we're still not sure exactly what the efficacy rate is, or whether you do a half dose and then a full dose or something else. It seems that Sinovac and Sinopharm's products are becoming the vaccine of choice for Brazil, especially Indonesia, Turkey, Pakistan, and other countries. There is a constantly repeated rumor that SK Bioscience is already manufacturing AstraZeneca's vaccine, but government statements do not confirm this. And the last official statement that I've seen still talking about vaccine in the late second half of 2021. But the good news is all Koreans, or nearly all Koreans, will accept vaccination. We're not going to get a 50-50 response like in America. So if all this is true, recovery in Q1 especially, and Q2 will be muted next year. Companies selling to consumers are going to have to continue to rely on online sales. B2B will be less affected, as you know. Investment will continue by large companies, but SMEs, and particularly micro SMEs, continue to have a battle for survival. As you drive around the streets, you will see so many for rent signs in day. Exports will depend on how far major economies can control their own pandemic, because Korea is not alone in being in the third wave, and on the rollout of vaccination. So all this is saying, don't expect Q1 of 2021 to be any different from Q4 of 2020. Q2 of 2021 maybe, but we're really looking at a split year in which the second half is notably better than the first half. That's confirmed up to a point by BOK's November outlook. I quoted the August outlook earlier, and you will see here on the left-hand column that H1 will be 2.6. I think this is wildly imaginative. And then H2 will be 3.3, which is conceivable. They're expecting private consumption to recover in H1. If it did, that would be driving that GDP figure of 2.6. I don't think we're going to see that. Investment, yes. Some government expenditure, yes. Construction, they're not expecting to recover first half. Exports strongly recover. And then they have these three scenarios on the right-hand side here for the world and for Korea. And their worst case is 2.2 for 2021. I'm going to explain why I think that's not the worst case, or even necessarily the probable case. However, for 2022, just because it's a bad 2021, it's because first half is bad, second half is good, and we will soar into 2022. So you shouldn't take the 2022 forecast as being connected with the 2021 initial outcome. I'll talk about that more. So here from HSBC's Navigator annual survey in December, there's a proportion of businesses that expect growth of overall sales in the next year under new normal. You can see that the Indonesians are wildly excited and only slightly muted in their expectations for next year. And ADB says they will grow by 5%. Mainland China, not quite so excited, surprisingly muted, given that November exports were up 21%, but going to grow by about high 77% or 8%. South Korea, more miserable, only 46 or less than half of companies expect to be back in 2021, and growth between 2 and 3%, depending on who you listen to and which scenario. Japan, more pessimistic. And although Japan will grow by 2.7%, that will still leave Japanese GDP in 2021 below 2019 size of GDP. Korea will be above because we're only going to be minus 1.1. And of course, China is going to be positive this year at 2%. Indonesia will be well on the way to recovery. As far as what the new normal looks like, digital world, we can expect to stick with this army of delivery men with no social welfare, with networking 14 hours a day, which makes a mockery of everything that Moon Jae-in's policy stands for. Health expenditure from private to national expected to expand. Everybody needs to upgrade computers and phones to deal with the increase of use of everything digital. So I said 2021 is a split year. Back 6 months ago, we're expecting a whole of 2021 to look different from 2020. Not going to happen. The only countries that are going to be above 2019 are likely to be China, Vietnam, Taiwan, Korea, Indonesia, all significantly in RCEP. RCEP, I'm sure you've studied. I just want to make 2 points. One is RCEP accelerates Asia's rise, and you get people like Stuart Tate, head of HSBC, saying this is really going to pull the economic center of gravity towards Asia in 2021, 22. You get Toyota Motors president, because Japan is a big winner in this, in his capacity as Japan Automobile Manufacturers Association, saying the whole industry welcomes RCEP. So we're going to see a flood of investment looking for somewhere to go in Asia. Korea's got a good rap in 2020 for having controlled emissions up until now. And basically Europe and US will not recover their 2019 GDP levels in 2021. Have to wait till 2022. According to ADB, the countries on the left from China down to Brunei are going to grow in 2021. We'll not spend much time on this except to show the chart. And you can ask Frederick for these charts as soon as the session has ended, which, if you haven't already seen this diagram, outlines who's in CPTP and who's in RCEP. And now we have Xi Jinping saying he's ready to join CPTPP. If he does, then Korea has no reason not to join as well. So that's there. RCEP needs 6 ASEAN members and 3 non-ASEAN members to sign up before it's effective. So that means H2 2021, but if you're an investor, you pre-position. And the point that I'm not seeing made is that RCEP does for Asia what the EU treaties do for Europe. This is a quote: if sounds complicated, existing production. RCEP makes it possible to design a toaster in Japan, meet RCEP rules, and ship it straight to 14 other markets in Asia without redesign or remanufacturing. As I said, Japan comes out very well in RCEP. As an added bonus, the company only has to use 1 certificate of origin rather than grapple with dozens of different forms. Doesn't matter where in RCEP bits and pieces have come from, it has a single source certificate, and that makes supply chain sourcing in Asia easy, especially if this certificate were accepted by the EU, as it might be, or more distantly by the US. Let's just think for a minute about the won. You've noticed how you're not getting so many won for the dollar. And so we are now in this state where the won, yen and the $1 have crossed over, the red against the blue. And all this means that the dollar is low in value, as you see, because even under Brexit, the dollar is buying not so much, or buying less in terms of pounds. Will this continue? Currency values are hard to predict, but look at these figures down here on the 206, 208, when we were down pretty well at the 900 to 950 level. That's just before the global financial crisis. We're now at 1060. We could drop further below 1,000, but currency values are hard to predict, as I said, because currency traders are looking at the world a different way from the way business people do. So finally, before we get on to the next theme, we're on the second theme, by the way, out of 5, which is how Asia is going to attract more and more business, and Korea as part of Asia is going to get more attention. These are some numbers. Now, they are a scenario. They're not a firm prediction, so I wouldn't buy any derivatives based on it. But you can see in Q1 that we are looking at a minus figure for GDP, because in 2020, Q1 was positive. The other quarters were negative. So basically, we're still in that negative range. We're looking, according to BOK, at a worse negative figure for Q4 in order to get that annual minus 1.1. And then we start getting better, plus 1.8 maybe in Q2, Q3 2.2, in Q4 3.3 year on year, I'm talking about. But when we add all that up, we only get to 1.67, and BOK in its pessimistic scenario is saying it's going to be over 2%. What we're really going to see is this rapid acceleration like this in the second half. So we need to make sure that we're ready for that in terms of supplies in Korea if you're in consumer goods, but not to expect it in the first half. Kita is saying 6% average in 2021, likely to get plus 4 to 5 after a no October negative. These are all what's actually happened. So going forward, we're expecting growth to be in the 4%. The line is the percentage bar chart of the totals. Remember that Korea is constantly offshoring industry. So that builds in a natural decline in exports as they were last year. Next year, TVs are going out from LG's plant in Kumi to Indonesia. LG is big on Indonesia. Samsung's already transferred them to Vietnam. The only thing that you're going to see coming out of TVs in LG and Samsung are going to be super rollable screens and super huge OLEDs and micro LEDs. Now, one last thing is government expenditure. If I just go back here, one of the things we don't know, government final expenditure is about 15% of GDP at the present time, is whether it's really going to grow, as I'm suggesting, because if you look at these figures for the budget, which is now finally approved, the first time Korea's ever approved its budget within its statutory time limit. Last year, including the extra stuff, Korea's spending increased 9.1%. And in 2021, it's going to increase 8.9%. That means that the amount that the government is spending is slightly less. So they are putting slightly less into the economy than they were in 2020. And that will be less of a boost for final consumption, which is round about 60% of the Korean economy, government spending plus consumer. So those are the first two themes and how probable the economy is going to grow. The next thing is social, and it's what I call the crisis of moonism. If moonism is defined as post-Marxist left ideology or Piketty thinking in terms of Piketty's question of equality, basically my judgment is that policies of President Moon could broadly be said to be a disaster. He slowed the economy before COVID came by making labor more expensive and less flexible, minimum wage, 52-hour week. His social network still doesn't give half the population over 65 enough to live on, nor half the workforce protection under the 4 insurances. They don't get national pension, they don't get health, they don't get industrial accident, and they don't get unemployment pay. All of these were exposed at various points during COVID crisis. Government put extra money on the table to do some of these and a commitment to improve coverage. But we're not going to get to the full coverage for everybody until 23, 24, 25, so in the next presidency. As you're well aware, housing policy hangs like a millstone around the administration's neck and even around the DPM's neck personally, as he has to know where to live because he can't get a new Chonsei place. Further attempts to play God on loans and buying 100,000 apartments and hotel rooms to convert into small apartments. All these plans cost most of the investment budget planned in the numbers I've just shown you. Of course, he has axed the Minister of Land who's responsible, poor lady, or stupid lady, I'm not quite sure. But until the government accepts that market forces have a role in the housing market, everything's going to go wrong, and I see no change coming. Moon's North Korea policy had its moments of success, but his unwillingness to act beyond the US tutelage once the US got into the act has left his supporters disappointed and the North distrustful. I see little chance that that will improve. Prosecutive wars, what can I say? They make a mockery of law and order. They've deprived the DP of young voters' support over Minister Chu's support for her son, and made the Prosecutor General the most popular figure for the next president in 2022. Doesn't mean he's going to be that, but it's an indication of what might happen in the elections for Seoul Mayor and Busan Mayor in April next year. Is the Democratic Party becoming more democratic? No, it's not. It's using its dominance in the National Assembly rather than arguments to advance its further policies. And I'm saying all this because I was a supporter of President Moon when he came in. And we'll really see the test in the mayoral by-elections and of March 22 president's elections. I don't have time to go into all these issues. Housing will continue to complete disrespect for market forces, prosecutors, senseless destruction of public trust, no resignations suggested. Green Deal. Could there be a better Green Deal? Will the private sector make up the balance? In some parts, as I'll say in a minute, yes, they will. But still, in terms of zero emission policy by 2050, the big business of Korea is putting pressure on the Hongnan-gi for not going too fast on this. They do not want to give up their coal, do not want to give up the emissions, and so on. and they have to learn. New digital deal, nice, except they're relying on SMEs to become unicorns, and good luck with that. April elections we talked about. North Korea, can Moon regain North's trust in the Biden interregnum before we see what US policy is like? Probably not. And the value of the won, it favors importers and less effective to manufacturers, especially exporters. So you'll see some holding back there, or other industries shipped off to Vietnam or Indonesia. So to come down to it, what to expect. First half of 2022, disappointing. Kita says 6% average export increase. Q1 is still going to be negative, Q2 positive. So following going to do well, chip companies, IT companies, AI learners, we're all AI learners, platform builders, biohealth companies, services, green vehicles, hydrogen energy, delivery companies based around apps, content companies and games, all flourish, and shipbuilding recovers because demand for ships will go up as the fleet is aging and needs to become more environmentally friendly. But the following depend on the COVID level: the consumer service sector, my coffee shop, restaurants, offline stores, cinemas, gyms, health clubs, education sector, and a whole range of other services. They cannot recover until COVID is under control. What to watch out for as an employer: more labor legislation, especially later retirement age, the new ILO conventions, hopefully including reform of Labor Union Act in favor of employers, plus another 284 more bills affecting business. Taxes will go up next year, and particularly as an early leader, employer and employee contributions to the four insurances. And then second half 2021, start of the real recovery, which goes on through first half 2022. That's good time to have presidential elections, by the way. Always government pumps money into the economy in Q4 before the Q1 presidential elections in 2022. So expect lots of money. Assume vaccines are generally available, preparing for recovery of tourism. Tourism has held up well in Korea as long as the rich cannot leave Korea. The rich all get COVID passports before normal tourists between China, Japan, Southeast Asia. There becomes a tourist deficit. The world economy recovers. We're talking about second half here. Basically accelerating exports, therefore, little bit of a problem in Q3 because Chuseok changes from Q4 to Q3. Lots of new investments. RCEP, increased competition with Japan as tariff reductions kick in, if enough people are signed up by second half. And Green Deal has the potential to show much more investment. Frederick, you're muted, but I hope you're going to tell me when I'm running out of time.
Yes,
I'm nearly at the end. How much more time do I have?
You still have 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes.
Oh, that's still more than I have slides for. Good.
All right. I'm not sure.
So what about the green economy? I think we're all interested in things environmental and sustainable, and ESG has become the password for many people's plans. So government has been planning, and we see a bit in November 26 of where their plans have got to. And companies and citizens are acting, but not all companies. So November 26 at the economic meeting to deal with the New Deal and the current epidemic, they say we're going to recalibrate consumption boosting measures amid signs of resurgent virus. Nobody has any idea what that will be, and neither did the committee. Then ways to grow high-tech SMEs for them to help achieve local growth. Well, as I said, good luck with that too. So they say the government will reorganize key local industries according to the Green New Deal with a classification of digital, green, or high value added industries. This creates 48 sectors. You've got to love the planners. And the government will offer each sector the support it needs, except it will be impossible for SMEs to get that support. Investment, because of red tape and tax and whatever. Investment, R&D, financing, loans and guarantees, market development, including overseas markets and job training. It's a big program. And then 100 local enterprises are selected for R&D and commercialization support and as future leaders of the local economies, as though the government planners knew what they looked like. More interesting, and check that you're in one, they're going to make regulation-free zones a New Deal foundation and specify the types of regulation-free zones. It could be digitally free zone, free of regulation, or green, free of regulation, and a green startup town will be set up next year, plus innovative SME towns. Yes. Meanwhile, in the real world, private enterprise institutions, coal plant funding has almost stopped. Hydrogen economy is getting a real start. Shipbuilding is producing new types of clean vessels. SK has joined R100, which is a club of big companies around the world to get to the zero economy. Banks and asset managers have got or getting ESG religion. Korea leads the world in batteries and ESS systems. Once safety issues are solved and the public supports this, as I said, there's a backlog of old dinosaur companies that are resisting, and they seem to have the ear of the Minister for Finance and Economy. So we've talked about when COVID will be under control, and we're hoping we're talking about second half of next year. We've talked about Asia being exciting generally, so that anyone who's not in Asia is thinking, what can I do in Asia? And that will include, what can I do in Korea? So those plans in the drawer need to be ready. We've explained that Moonism is in deep trouble, and that will be reflected in the ballot box. We've seen a bit about Green Deal, where it's coming, but the planners are building a fantasy world. And the last issue is this, that government has spent a lot of money this year and is planning to borrow a lot more than it derives from tax or other sources. And it's beginning to plan for the fact that the population is going to shrink from 2020 to 2060, when the population of Korea without additional migrants will be only 43.6 million compared with 52, and the workforce under 65 will decline by 16.78 million to just 11 million, that's 27 million today, and 47% of the population will be over 65. Any responsible government has to work towards this. We are said to be 20 years behind Japan in this shrinking population. If we had 5 million extra migrants, that would restore this to 48.6 million and the workforce to about 14 million, according to Ministry of Economy and Finance. But even managing the present social safety net in a population where the number of income earners and therefore tax base shrinks will be almost impossible. I had lunch with a former DPM. He was a colleague of mine in the Economic Planning Board when we were all 5-year economic planners back in the Stone Age. And we are talking about universal business income, universal basic income or universal basic dividend, and a whole range of other things that are now beginning to be discussed and will be in play during the presidential election 2022. During the period 21 to 25, government plans to build out social safety net through increasing debt. and increasing your contributions and employees' contributions to 4 insurances. This long-term plan says GDP will grow 2.3% on average in 2020s. That will be well done, but by 2050s, it's down to 0.5% on average. So fundamentally, Korea is going to need to rethink everything about its present policies and trajectory to manage the future. What we're hoping for is it will form its ministerial structure dealing with immigration from the 4 ministries currently dealing with it to a single ministry, and that they will make life for foreigners with residence permits much more simple and more equal with Koreans. So that's one thing to look forward to. What can I say about North Korea in no time at all, except we haven't heard much of them since they showed off their really nice tin cans and their really genuine made in North Korea loaders. And Kim Jong-un became emotional when he talked about the 3 burdens. We hope that international sanctions might be slightly improved, that COVID epidemic we dealt with. But as one North Korean said to me not so long ago, even when that's solved, God still doesn't like us because we still get more typhoons, flooding, and extreme weather. And Kim said he'd look forward to engagement with beloved countrymen in the South. The new team of President Moon dealing with the North are frustrated because they really can't get anywhere in terms of moving forward. We'll see whether 2021 offers an opportunity. But the stupidest idea I've seen is that Kim Jong-un will come to the Olympics in Tokyo in 2021 and meet Moon Jae-in. Neither of them need to go that far. They've just got to drive up to the DMZ. So if I can sum up, I'm painting a picture of more or less the way it was in Q1, getting a bit better in Q2, depending on vaccine and other control measures. But we're going to see growth in the second half of 2021, quite substantial growth, a lot of interest in Korea coming from all parts, from finance through to corporate planning. And basically, the future is still uncertain. So thank you for listening. And even if you're a statue cast in metal, keep wearing your mask.
Thank you very much, Tony. It was a very comprehensive presentation. Thank you for that. Erwan has joined us for the Q&A. Good afternoon, Erwan. I think you have your mic off.
Yes, sorry, I was struggling to connect initially, but I'm here. Yeah, thanks, Tony. Very interesting and very comprehensive view. It was actually just before we moved to the questions. The government just announced this morning they had their supply plan for COVID-19 ready. I mean, it's a bit surprising what's inside because they say they plan to get the vaccines introduced by Q1 next year. They had reduced the timeline to get access to the vaccine from 18 months to 6 months, but should have brought us to June. But apparently now they say Q1 would be the date. But they say also that the exact timing has not been decided yet. And apparently they would count on the 10 million people vaccinated with the AstraZeneca vaccines, 10 million with Pfizer, 10 million with Moderna, 4 million with Janssen, and 10 million with COVAX would be the mix of vaccines. But very strange because we're discussing with them every day, and up to this morning we had no confirmation, and it was very difficult to understand how they would move on. So we need to wait for more details to understand what's going to happen. But if this is true, they would plan to even further accelerate the availability of the vaccines. Right now, most of the discussions are happening on the liabilities because the government has been I mean, looking at the issues that happened with the flu vaccines, where there were some issues in the cold chain, and also then media started to comment on people dying after the vaccination, although there was no link between the flu vaccines and the people dying. I know the government was very cautious, and right now, because of how the vaccines were developed, the speed of development and the speed of the testing, most of the discussions also on the liabilities between the government, the manufacturers and distributors of the vaccines.
Thank you very much, Erwan. We have a few, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. I don't see the questions. I'm not sure why. I've seen there were some questions coming up, but I can't
yes,
see
we
them.
have some question from Michel Martinez from Lotte Nestlé CFO. We all hope that COVID-19 pandemic will improve in 2021. Would there be industries or channels that will recover faster than others?
That's a good question. What we're talking about are those industries which are not already doing well. So I'm leaving outside semiconductors and contents and so on. I think that we will see an explosion of the variety of Korean life. If I reflect on how Korea has developed since the economy stopped growing as fast as it used to, it's in a diversity. And therefore, I think the food service sector, I think coffee shops and cafes, and at long last, we can get to bars and make up our alcohol deficit. I think all of this service sector is going to grow very fast once we are back where we want to be. It's really hard to say that other areas like department stores or hypermarkets are really going to see this evolution because of everybody shopping online. So you cannot, I mean, you can shop for coffee online, but that's not the point. You want to go to a nice cafe and have a coffee. You want to go out and have a meal really rather than order in. So lots of people have kept SMEs, mom and pop restaurants alive by these platforms for ordering online. And many of the areas that you wouldn't expect to do well in this period, like hotels in the countryside, like Mercedes cars and other high-end cars, they've all done very well because the rich have had not enough to spend their money on. So at the very time that ordinary people are recovering, the rich are going to be on their first trips to Macau, to Thailand, to Maldives, back to the US to see friends, Hawaii, whatever. So we're going to have money going out of the economy in some areas as well as growing in the economy in other areas. I don't know, Erwan, what do you think?
Yeah, probably. I mean, there's a lot of sectors also that are benefiting from people coming inside of Korea. So I think at some point reopening and getting people to be able to consume medical services and other of the Korean stuff, which are attracting tourists from around the region, is probably going to be positive for us.
Yeah, and also Korea, as seen as a relatively safe place, is going to be more attractive than Thailand, say, or some of the other tourist destinations. Vietnam would do even better, of course.
All right, yeah, thank you very much. Another question from Michel Martinez. It's more related to the local politics. The 2021 presidential election, what can we expect, DPK or PPP? Was right now the more leverage to get into power?
Well, before we get to presidential elections, we have to have the fight inside each party to see who will be the candidate. And that will, to a degree, moderate the attractiveness or unattractiveness of the future. So, for example, I mentioned that Prosecutor General Yoon is the most popular figure nominated under current opinion polls. However, he is not really an opposition figure. He's not really a PPP candidate. He's more on the left side. That's why he was appointed by Moon. I was in a discussion yesterday where it was argued that for PPP to win, they need a young candidate. They need not the people you know at the moment, but some of the bright people in the National Assembly on the PPP side who are young. And if they do, then the Democratic Party ought to be choosing someone young as well. And I think I would vote for a generational shift and have these tired old men go and play golf. But it's too early to say whether Moonism can recover, new Moonism, and then the governor of Gyeonggi-do might become president and will be, although he's old, a really new face. But I think it's too early to say. It's too early to say even who the candidates will be.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Michel, thank you for your question. Erwan, maybe you want to comment, or shall I go to the next question maybe?
No, I think maybe before that, in relation to that, because you mentioned also about the disastrous policy of Moon. I mean, I'm in a room now, you cannot hear, but outside there's a lot of sounds because we have 5 unions demonstrating from different companies in the same building. So I see a lot of activities increasing on the union side. I also read a few papers of people from the opposition starting to be raising voices against the government pushing too much the unions. How do you see all that evolving, specifically looking at the social conditions getting more complicated with the crisis?
I think what COVID has uncovered is the half of Korea who has not benefited from Moonism. They are not normally our employees. They might be our delivery people, and they are not the ma and pas or self-employed. And so there's a kind of 50% who are disinherited. And all young people think they're disinherited, but they thought that before Moon became president. They had high hopes he would be better. I expect that we get more union activity. If the ILO legislation goes through as pushed by the EU, it'll be easier to form more little unions. So you'll have more unions within your workforce. I use as an example the union for bank workers over, or finance institution workers aged over 50, which is a separate group. So we're going to see this disintegration of social cohesion into more lobbying groups, demonstrating groups, whatever they're going to do. I don't see it coming together during 21 or 22. It's up to the next president to try and do that.
Okay, I see we have other questions. You want to go for them?
Yes, sure. Yes, so the last question, I mean, from Michel, another question. Is that work from home increasing trend going to sustain in Korea, considering the Korean culture?
Sorry.
Oh, yes, I repeat the question.
I was reading the other questions that we got on the chat. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Is the work from home increasing trend going to sustain in Korea, or considering the Korean culture?
Work for all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's impossible to put the genie back in the bottle on that. So the way of diffusing that, discussed by both PPP and Governor of Gyeonggi-do, is universal basic income. However, you managed to fund that. So I see this as being one of the debates which will lead up to the presidential election. And once you have universal basic income being unemployed and uninsured to get unemployment pay becomes less significant. And that's a way why work for all. I mean, we have about 500,000 people over 65 who are doing not really important work. I mean, some of them are because they're working in the health sector, pushing gurneys and whatever. But there is no real sense in what the government's doing. They could equally pay these people not to work as to work. I don't know whether that's quite the answer that Martin was looking for.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much, Tony. I think there is no more question from here. I just have a question.
I have 3 questions.
There are 3 more questions.
A few questions, yeah.
All right. Okay.
So, I'm not sure why I don't see the one from Michelle, but I see you have a question. There's one from Carsten saying, how do you see the quality relationship of the Moon administration and the chaebols in 2021?
Yep. Basically, well, I mean, I didn't mention it, but we have the Samsung lawsuits, or the 2 lawsuits, which are going on at the moment. And these are highly political, highly sensitive. And the question is whether the government will actually intervene. And if it intervenes, which way will it go? Does it want to punish Samsung or Mr. Lee? Or does it want to see some kind of act of contrition in which he agrees to take over 500,000 make for work or 200,000 SME workers or some kind of penance for Samsung shareholders to pay for. With the other chaebol, there's a tremendous, there's really a lot going on. The SK is totally shaking itself up. Lotte is totally selling off many of its outlets and closing down rather than restructuring. CJ also badly hit by COVID and so on. And so we have some fair economy laws coming through amongst the 284. I think it will not be a year in which chaebol find government very sympathetic. And maybe that gives us an answer about the fate of Mr. Lee in one of the 2 cases at least.
Yeah, thank you. We have just 2 more questions from Una Choi from Minds Group. Hello, Tony. You had mentioned the prosecutor wars as a senseless destruction of public trust. Can you elaborate? Why do you think this is so?
Well, if you get the minister, I mean, we have basically, since this all started, we have destroyed the careers of 2 promising people, Cho Guk and Minister Chumier, in fighting with Prosecutor General Yoon, who was supposed to be a fairly neutral figure. He's been converted into a kind of iconic figure for the opposition, which was not anybody's idea. And some of the things that have come out, like there was universal opposition by judges and prosecutors over the suspension, sorry, not by prosecutors over suspension of Mr. Yoon, and the court put him back in this job. There was a proposal that the police could force people to give over their passwords, as they do in some other democracies. But under the Korean constitution, you're not supposed to be able to convict yourself. And then there was the case of the pressure by Cho Mie on behalf of her son, who was in the military, and so on, and other things that have all gone on. And at the end, you say, I don't trust the Ministry of Justice. There's some allegations against prosecution that I also am not happy about. And I don't know that the proposed solution from the government, this committee to try top people, is going to work. So that's my take on it. What I have to say is that the judges, the judge system seems to have worked very well resisting pressure from prosecutors. There's another war going on, of course, between the police and the prosecutors, the judges and the prosecutors, and those in private practice law and everybody else. But the judges on the whole, I thought, have made good judgments, starting from the impeachment of President Park. That's in political cases, and I can't say in individual cases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you very much, Tony. One more question.
Last question, yes.
Yes, from Françoise Leval from Kim and Chang. Is there any plans for policy to boost the birth rate in Korea and reverse the aging of the population? What is your view on the subject with the election in 2022?
And the funny thing is that there's quite a lot of money available for increasing the birth rate, and some opposition, I believe, or government member of the National Assembly asked how this money had been spent. And all kinds of crazy things got money from this pot. It was like a pot people could dip into and support anything. None of it really supporting the birth rate. I think universal basic income would actually be one thing which might encourage the birth rate, because it means that mothers for the first time get an income, and therefore they're being paid, if you like, to be mothers. On top, we're assuming that the existing social security apparatus more or less stays the same. So this is really something extra. Obviously, migrants are more fertile than Koreans, or more willing to have children. When an older Korean man marries a Vietnamese lady, that increases the birth rate. So if you look at the actual birth rate, you find a surprising number are from non-Korean marriages. If you want to encourage the birth rate as opposed to Korean bloodline, you could encourage more of this kind of mixed marriage, I think. Do I see any policy changes coming? I think nobody really knows what to do. People have been trying to work on it for a long time without much success. Owen, what do you think?
Well, yeah, I think we've seen a lot of news a couple of years ago on things that were done to try to get people to meet and promote weddings and birth rates. I don't have a feeling in the economy really there was some very effective stimulus to push people to feel more, actually the young people, a young part of the population, to feel more safe. I think we've seen more actions to support the oldest part of the populations. And I think there's on both sides, I think on one side, a sentiment related to the economy getting more complicated than the crisis, so people feeling unsafe and not willing to get into to get kids when they know it's quite expensive. With also some social aspects of more women working or not willing to get married. So it's a combination of facts. There's no immigration like what you see in other countries. In Europe, a lot of immigration is also pushing the birth rate. So I don't think there's been anything really efficient done to push that. And we continue to discuss pushing the retirement age to higher levels, which will also create more difficulties to get employment or jobs created for a young part of the population. So I'm not sure I see the end of the tunnel on that side.
And if you wanted to create an intelligent policy, you would look at the arguments of why people don't have children. One is the cost of the child, particularly the cost of education. And you would need to move to a free education system. I mean, ironically, when I was growing up, all the projections were that the British population would decline. First they thought it would grow, then it would decline. And then suddenly, miraculously, everybody decided they'd rather have 3 children than 2 children. And the population continued to grow. But I don't see any incentive for young people to think that they want to start a family other than the natural urge to procreate. So I think you have to look very carefully at the deterrents. And I think we need to move to a free education system, including graduate, not including graduate school, including undergraduate. And that might make a difference.
Yeah, great. I think we're getting to the end because it's already 1 o'clock. I see some people dropped out already, probably moving to other meetings. But thanks, Tony. Always, I mean, becoming a yearly habit and always a good one, because I think you always provide great insights on the politics and economy, and certainly very useful at this moment of the year. So thank you again for that.
Thank you very much.
To all the people online, as you've seen, we had to cancel our Christmas dinner, unfortunately. I think we're moving along with all the other associations or chambers, which are also canceling the gathering due to the COVID numbers increasing. We will, as soon as possible, try to get back offline and try to get more social moments. But obviously now the priority is to be safe and make sure all the people participating in our event stay safe. So we would stay offline as long as we have to do so. The next event, Frederic?
We are putting together in January. We are now speaking to Kim and Chong about a new custom regulation event, and also with Nestle on advocacy and regulatory. The date will be coming out very soon. We're also, the board have been working together also to put the next year agenda. We will have social events if we can, like Erwan said. The Swiss Business Club trying to also to get together as Swiss business CEOs to speak about their experience on the local market. So we are putting right now the event together, and we will be sharing this agenda on our website. Next week also, we will be sending out the 2021 membership campaign. So we are looking forward to welcome you again in 2021 as a member. Your support count, of course, to run our organization.
Great, thanks, Frederic. So yeah, you'll stay tuned. You'll see on the online the next events. Don't hesitate if there's any topic of your interest that we're not treating, or any things you want to propose to. If you want to raise it, we can definitely put it on the agenda. As Frederic mentioned in the last mail he sent to all the members, don't hesitate as well to invite to all these events people from your company. It's totally open and easy to do with online participation. Great. So I won't take more of your time. Just want to wish you happy Christmas, nice year end, and we will see you next year on the next event.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tony. Thank
Bye,
you,
everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, Tony.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.